Hello everyone and welcome to session 1. Here we are going to be studying the psychological factors in sports for young athletes. So the course outline would be, we'll be studying the psychological factors, we'll be doing the exercises, and then we also have a recap. It is now evident from the details of this course that the mental aspects are important along with the physical aspects. One of the objectives of sports psychology is to study the psychological factors and how they affect individuals in a sports setting. So we are going to be looking at 4 factors here which play an important role, and these are motivation, attribution, self-confidence, and emotions. These psychological factors are important because young athletes and young players must be educated about how important it is to be motivated, what kind of attributions they need to have, how their self-confidence affects their performance, and also how emotions play a very important role. So understanding of psychological factors and helping young children develop and groom into better players is the whole objective of sports psychology. So let us look at the first psychological factor, that is motivation. So motivation is, again, it's a drive or a force, and it is something that pushes us, something that makes us work towards our objective. In the words of Sage, it is defined as the direction and intensity of effort. So direction is, we are motivated and attracted to a certain aspects or certain parts, and once we are attracted to that, then we put all our effort with great intensity. So if a child is attracted, and if they like the sport, then they pursue their practice sessions and they put in all the effort that they can. But in the same way, if they don't like, for many young children do not like physical skills training, running and endurance, etc. So at that point of time, if they do not like it so much, then the direction, they try to avoid it, or even the intensity of effort is reduced. So motivation is critical for success and also helps us to reach our goals. So once we know what motivation is, let us look at what are the types of motivation. So we have 2 types of motivation. You have the intrinsic motivation and extrinsic. Intrinsic is everything that comes from within the athlete, within the player, right? The player pursues the sport, does the sport because they like it. They want to improve themselves, they find it exciting, it's fun, and also they get a whole sense of satisfaction from pursuing the sport. And this is a very important type of motivation. Most athletes and most players should be directed towards intrinsic motivation, and this is the best form, because when you are intrinsically motivated, that's when you can also experience the flow state or the zone, which has already been discussed in the earlier modules. The second type of motivation is the extrinsic motivation. That, of course, comes from everything outside of the player, right? It's the rewards, it's the praise, it's the money. It'll also be, to evade the coach's punishment, right? You do things to evade coach's punishment. You reach on time, otherwise, the coach may probably make you run some rounds. So everything is external. And it's very extrinsic rewards or extrinsic motivation is very useful and helpful in developing intrinsic motivation. But we all, as parents, coaches, and mentors, we need to exercise caution when we try to use the extrinsic motivation or the rewards or the praise, especially when a player or an athlete is already intrinsically motivated. Here, I would like to just give you a very small story which helps us understand. So once there was a elderly man, and he loved to do gardening, and he tended his garden, and he developed a very beautiful garden with lovely flowers and trees and exotic kind of flowers that were there. One day he comes home and he finds that his garden is completely trampled, all the flowers are fallen, the trees are wilted, and he's very disappointed and upset because he loves the garden. And he waits the next day with great anticipation to catch the animal who had done this. To his surprise, he found 4 young boys come and start playing to the side of the garden. When they were playing football, when the ball moved to the left and right, they dived into the garden, they dived on the flowers, and they damaged the trees and damaged the flowers. So he thought what he could do to help these kids and also help himself and preserve his garden. So he thought of a plan. He called the 4 young boys and he said, "Hey guys, I'm going to give you 50 rupees for coming and playing here every day. And, I know you love my garden, I love my garden, so I'm going to give you this money. So they were all very excited, the boys. They started coming and they said, you know what, we're getting paid for coming. And this happened for a few days. And after that, the old man said that, I can't give you so much. I don't have that much money. I'm going to reduce it. And he said, I'm going to give you 15 rupees for coming and playing every day. So the boys came for a few days, and then later on, they stopped coming totally. And in fact, this is a lesson that, when the boys were already intrinsically motivated to come and play, an extrinsic reward like, giving them money only kind of diminished their intrinsic motivation to come and play. And the boys stopped coming to play because they thought that the elderly man was controlling them. So when we use extrinsic motivation, extrinsic rewards, we should be careful when we are already dealing with a motivated child. And so why is it that some children are motivated, some young athletes are more motivated than others? Because the motivation level fluctuates from individual to individual. Why is it that some are more motivated? So McKellen has given his explanation for this and says that there is something called as a need for achievement. So the need for achievement is seen in some children where they have a desire to achieve. It's something that is inborn. The need for achievement is a genetic composition. The desire to achieve is more powerful than the fear of failure. And what these young players and athletes do is they seek more challenges, they put more effort, they train harder, and also persist even when they're in trouble or when in times of difficulty on the court or in the matches. So that is why some of them are more motivated and more, seek achievement. There's also another explanation that talks about, that kind of monitors or controls motivation. This is called the self-determination theory given by Decky and Ryan. And what Decky and Ryan said that for all individuals and all players and everybody to be motivated, 3 basic psychological needs need to be satisfied. So the first one is autonomy, second one is competence, and the third one is relatedness. In autonomy, it says that one has to be in control of what they do. One has to have the freedom to decide what they want to do, to work towards their goals, to work towards their needs and their interests. And the second aspect is competence, that is the need to master the skills. So, as a coach, we need to give the player the time to, develop their skills and to master the skills. And finally, you have the relatedness, that is a need to establish bond and relationship with others. So we feel motivated when we can gel with others, when we are socially related to others, when we form part of groups, etc. So when these 3, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, are not allowed or not given to the athlete or to the player, then their motivation can reduce. So being very controlling in terms of what the player needs to do, what he micromanaging them, is kind of diminishing their motivation. How do we encourage intrinsic motivation, right? So we all know that intrinsic motivation is more preferable than extrinsic motivation, because eventually it's has to come from within, and everything that you do has to be self-driven. So as coaches, what can we do? And even as parents, what can we do? So firstly is you can schedule practice with great variety and fun. So what happens is they like to come to practice every day. It's not a mundane chore that, they're pushed to come, but, they come out of their own will. Then rewarding the performance and the effort and not winning. So very less emphasis has to be given on winning, and we should reward the performance and the great effort. Hey, you gave a great pass, or you gelled well with the team, or you did a great interception. So the effort is more important than actually winning, because these are the small things that in a game that help you to win. And the third aspect is you cannot reward every behavior, you cannot reward every achievement, right? The reward has to be contingent or dependent on when the player or the athlete achieves a performance standard. So if you set a standard of for your player, like say in basketball, that you have to collect 10 rebounds and you have to shoot 10 baskets or 10 points, if the person has achieved it, then you could probably think of a reward. But if he or she has scored 2 points, collected 2 rebounds, then maybe the reward may not be the right thing, because he or she has not met the performance standard. So the next aspect that we talk about as a psychological factor is attribution. Very, very important in sports. Attribution is based on perception, and it basically talks about how we explain events. And in sport, we look at how do we explain success or failure, right? What do you attribute your success to? What do you attribute your failure to? So, what the answer that is given by the player or the athlete tells about how they perceive or they see things. So, like motivation, attribution also are two types. We have the internal attribution and the external attribution. So, in internal attribution, the athlete or the player takes responsibility for the performance, right? It's either their effort or their ability, whether they succeed or fail, they take the responsibility. External attribution, you're blaming it on the situation, all the external factors like what is listed, luck, what are the playing conditions, maybe your equipment weren't good, or even the umpiring or the referee. And external attributions are basically done to protect one's self-esteem. So I'll give you two instances here which will help us understand how we protect our ego and how attributions can be done. So in the first example, a very experienced doubles players, okay, two doubles players, they played against an inexperienced doubles pair, okay, and you can probably see what is the result, or you can tell what is the result. The experienced players beat the inexperienced players. After the match, the inexperienced players were heard saying they lost because one of them had an injury, and the second reason they gave is that one of them that they had a bad day. So, but in reality, this inexperienced team has lost to an experienced team. So, accepting that is not there, right? The external attribution is there too. You're protecting your ego and you're also protecting your self-esteem. And the second example I give you is about a group of young football players. They had gone to play a tournament, and in the finals, they lost the match very badly, 17-love to the opponent's team. And one of the parents was driving back the kids, and the children were giving the reasons why they lost the match. So one child said they lost the match because the umpiring was not good or the refereeing wasn't good. The second child said that they lost because the ground was not up to the mark. There were potholes, and there were it was not a smooth surface. And the third child started crying and said with tears in their eyes that in her eyes that we lost because we were not good. So now, if you look at these attributions, the two kids gave external attribution, whereas one child gave an internal attribution, that is, the ability was not good enough. So, the two children who gave the external attributions, if they start losing, in a couple of more matches, they will start developing attributions which will be given to external factors, and they will never take responsibility for themselves. So, it's very important in sport that you take responsibility for yourself, for your failure, and not only take responsibility for one's success. So here we see some attributions that are there that are given by players. The first one says, I played well and I won the match. That is an internal attribution. And the one on top, it says, we lost the match because the referee gave bad decisions. That is an external attribution. And the last one here doesn't talk about any attribution, but it just talks about whether the event will occur again. If I play that player again, I will beat him or her. So this shows that even though if the athlete has failed, he or she, the next time they play is going to beat the other player. Or if the player has won, the next time he or she plays the player again, they are going to win. So this is a kind of a stable attribution because you are, attributing your success or failure to yourself. So repeated failures can sometimes lead to a condition called as learned helplessness. So you saw in the example where I gave about the two children football players who attributed to external factors. So repeated failures 2 or 3 times more, if these children experience failures, it lead them to believe that they could never improve, right? And it's a stable thing that it's going to last forever. And giving up without trying is a meaning or the understanding of learned helplessness, where you don't want to try. So this is where, as coaches, as parents, and as mentors, we need to come in to help children understand that they need to take responsibility for their failure, right? Every failure cannot be attributed to external factors. It has to be also looked into the internal factor. So why is attribution important, right? It tells us about the expectation of future success or failure. So if you keep attributing to external factors, then the future success is also very, very debatable. Internal attribution is preferred over external attribution. Like I said, we have to take responsibility. So as coaches and even as parents and mentors, we have to educate athletes to develop internal attributions to their failure. That is, look at more about their ability, how much effort are they putting, so that they turn to improve. Then coaches can also help players change the faulty attribution. So it's a process that needs to be done, and coaches can observe the attributions given by young athletes over a period of time, and if it is consistently faulty and where they don't take responsibility for their failures, then the coaches can work with the players to change their attribution. The next aspect that we are going to look at here is a reflective exercise. Okay, just to break all the theory part that we discussed. So in this exercise, we are going to check out about the internal and external attributions. Okay, so Amrita is a college basketball player. Okay, her college team lost in an intercollegiate match. She gave these reasons. Right? The opposite team played a very rough game. The second attribution she gave is, I did not play up to the mark. So question number 1, okay, the opposite team played a rough game will be an external attribution, and number 2, I did not play up to the mark will be an internal attribution. So this gives you an idea of how internal and external attributions are given. The next psychological factor which is very important is self-confidence, because self-confidence can affect your performance, it can affect the way you stand on court, it can affect everything, because it's the platform for performance, it's the platform for reaching your goals. So what is self-confidence? The ability to complete a task successfully. So that is important. Successfully is an important concept, and it comes from the belief that you have the skills to do well in the sport, right? Because you have in performance in any way, you need to have the stuff or you need to have the skills, and it affects the motivation and the attribution. Now let us look at the relationship between self-confidence and performance relationship, So how does self-confidence affect the performance? So you have 3 types of self-confidence. You have the optimal self-confidence. This is very ideal for best performance, because this is where the best performance also happens, because you have the skills and you have the confidence enough to match the performance. And even if there are some ups and downs in your game and in the match, you are able to overcome it and you are able to deal with it because of your optimal self-confidence. Overconfidence, okay, is actually a false confidence, a kind of a bad confidence to have, because it's a mismatch between the skills and also the demands of the sport. You don't put in much effort, okay, you feel that effort is not necessary because you're like overly confident. And sometimes great upsets happens in matches and in tournaments because overconfidence, having overconfidence, feeling that you don't have the requirement or the need to work harder. And then you have the underconfidence, which is a worrying factor for coaches and parents, because here you have the skill but you're not performing, okay, because of certain reasons, because something let you down. So to understand how low confidence can affect the performance, let us look at this case here. A volleyball player consistently hits strong and accurate spikes during practice. Okay, so during practice, no problem. In the match, when the first spike is blocked, he or she starts to doubt oneself. Okay, so first error, or it's been blocked, so you start doubting. So the player becomes very cautious, is very ineffective in the subsequent spikes, thus losing the effectiveness. So the confidence that you had because of one error or one issue, you are losing your confidence and you're being ineffective in what you play. So this lack of confidence is accompanied by feeling of worry, uncertainty, fear, doubt, and anxiety. So this is something where the coach has to step in and encourage the player to try again, right? I mean, every time you will not be blocked, and you have to find some other way of evading the block in the case of this volleyball player. So how can we improve one's confidence, right? Players' confidence is always, there are ups and downs in confidence, and it's not a global self-confidence. Sometimes you're confident about certain things, sometimes you're not. But basically, what coaches and even parents can also do is improve technical and physical skills. So the more skilled you are, the more fundamentally sound you are that much confident, right? So you know what to do, you have everything in you, you have put in your hard work. Encourage a growth mindset. So as we have seen in the case of even learned helplessness, sometimes when children and young athletes are not able to perfect a skill, if they're not able to, learn a particular technical skill or a move, they face failure, they tend to think that that's the end of it, right? You don't have scope for improvement. And sometimes when they fail, they think that, this is what it is. They're no good for their sport, or they're no good. This would be the end. They don't want to pursue the sport. So we have to encourage a growth mindset where they have to be positive, where they have to see that, they have to understand that there is always scope for learning, and, by putting in hard work, you can improve. So a growth mindset has to be encouraged. And very important is the sporting environment or the coaching environment that we provide, and the environment we provide at home should foster development of self-confidence, right? That is your encouragement, your egging, your motivation, the way you talk to the child, the way you talk to the, young athlete is very important, because the environment should be friendly, it should be motivating rather than demotivating, and, not to pull up children for every small mistake that they do. So fostering confidence is very important. So we have another reflective exercise here, which talks about motivation. Okay. Nandan is a badminton player. His goal is to represent the state in badminton. He is motivated and works very hard to get better. Okay. And what are the questions? What kind of motivation does Nandan have? Do you think this is the only kind of motivation? So here, the Nandan has intrinsic motivation or internal motivation, and no, there are other kinds of motivation, and the other kind of motivation that we talked about is the extrinsic motivation. So you have the answers here. And finally, the last psychological factor that we are going to talk about is emotions. Okay. So emotions play a great part, because they represent our feelings and how we respond to a particular situation. And when since we all have feelings and we experience it, our emotions are in play, and emotions can be positive and it can be negative. Positive can be seen in, happiness, pride, joy, fun, enjoyment, etc. And negative can be seen in shame, sadness. It can be seen in frustration, and all these these all affect the player a lot. And emotions are not constant, they keep changing. So at one moment you may feel positive emotions, next moment if something happens on the court, you can have a negative emotion also. Like you may be, you may score a basket, you may be very happy, or you may hit a winning shot, you may be very happy. The next moment you make a small mistake or something, then you turn to be negative, you are upset, or you get frustrated. So it's constantly changing. So there are different emotions that can happen when you play in sport. The emotion that we are going to talk about, very important, is aggression in sport. Okay, so it's very common in sport, and the reason why we are discussing this is aggression has to be monitored, and aggression has to be curtailed in young people, and they have to be educated about it, because it can be very detrimental to their performance and to their sport. So aggression ranges from verbal abuse to causing psychological harm. Okay, so some words that can be said can affect the other opponent or the player mentally, or it can be physical abuse to violence. So punching someone, hitting someone, kicking someone aggressively. So what is aggression? So aggression is any form of behavior directed towards the goal of harming or injuring another living being who's motivated to avoid such treatment. So it can be directed to opponents, teammates, umpires, referees, and even the audience. So it's some form of, you want to harm, the goal is to harm. So aggression also can be seen in two types. You have the hostile and the instrumental. Hostile is where you want to harm. Intention is you have your anger, you want to punish the other person intentionally. Instrumental is done during the course of the game. So, it's like a tussle in football, or two people going for a rebound in basketball, where, the hands get interlocked, or you're fighting for the ball. So you don't want to cause harm, but you want to achieve your goal of getting the upper hand. So there are many theories which explain why aggression happens. So two interesting theories are here. Is the social learning theory, which tells that, when we watch other people and their aggressive behavior, then we learn from them. So even coaches, parents, senior players, etc., with the way they conduct themselves can have an influence on younger people. So you see somebody, elbowing another opponent, or kicking another opponent, or pushing, you tend to learn and think that that behavior is acceptable. So that is the social learning theory. Then you have the frustration aggression theory, which says that when we are stopped for doing something, it causes frustration and it can lead us to anger. Because we are angered, it in turn leads to aggression. So a small example, let's take a young boy is going in basketball for a layup shot, and he is stopped by taking the shot. He gets frustrated, And in that, the frustration can turn into anger. And if he doesn't control himself, he or she can push the other player or harm the other player. So let us look about a case about how aggressive behavior can be learnt. Okay. So Chetan is a 10-year-old football player, and he gets hurt while playing near the goal post, and he gets entangled. He doesn't know who has hit him or who is, responsible for this. Angered at this, he punches the nearest opponent in the nose, and because of this, he is sent off the field because he has done a foul intentionally. So the coach calls him aside and tells him that it is wrong to punch a player because he is needed on the field. He cannot be benched. But as he is sitting there, he hears his coach, feeling very proud and saying that what a competitor, Chetan is. And his father, who's also watching this particular game, after the game tells him that he's so proud of him punching the opponent, and, he should not, spare anybody who tries to hurt him. So what happens to Chetan, right? He grows up to become a goalie whose opponents fear. So anybody in the crease near the goal post where they're closely, in connection with him, get extra rough treatment. So this is how behavior is learned. We are unknowingly reinforcing behavior or aggressive behavior, which is a very, very wrong thing to do. So how do we deal with aggression? Firstly, education, right? Educating athletes about behavior control, like what is permissible, why they should, refrain from being aggressive. How can they manage themselves? Anger management is an important aspect. I was talking to one of the coaches, and he was telling me that, he worked on a young boy who had slapped one of his, players because he stopped him or made a foul on him. And after working with this player over a period of 3 to 4 years on anger management and behavior control, now that young boy is, developed into a fine, sporting athlete. So this is how we can educate and work with them. Then the International Society of Sports Psychology has given guidelines which could be followed. You can use role models in sport, like, people, former sports persons or even current sports person who have good sportsmanship, good character, and good, play in the sport can be a role model for these young people. Rules of the game has to be explained, what is permissible and what is not. And emphasizing the importance of sportsmanship, right? We have to take everything in the stride, and you cannot get angry, you cannot get upset and punch somebody or be, very aggressive. Coaches can also judiciously use punishment, right? Punishment can be used, and it can be like, making a person miss their practice, or being away from the, practice session for 2 weeks or whatever period of time, or, making them responsible for that their act, what they have done is really not necessary. So with this, we come to the end of this session 1, and we'll take a quick recap. We studied all the psychological factors, that is motivation, attribution, self-confidence, and emotions, that is aggression. We learned what they are, what is their importance, and how we can deal with each of these factors. So all the coaches, parents, mentors, even physical educators, please pay special attention to this concept about the psychological factors, because they play a very important role, and you can as mentors work with your players and athletes on these factors. So thank you.